Never forget the first time, my first encounter with the desert proper, driving out over the back of the Blue Mountains, and that moment of realizing that it was actually a sea floor. It was late afternoon, the light had just come through and it was hitting the rolling form of the old seabed, and the color that was starting to come through, the redness in the earth. And so I started to get a sense of the force of the landscape and the epicness of what I've been living in without actually realizing that. And I started looking at early colonial work in a very different way and seeing how they couldn't actually see where they were. And I don't say that as a matter of judgment, but just impossibility. That what their experience was so different to where they were that they couldn't come into contact with it. And I was in Tibooburra and I went into this tiny little museum, one-room museum, and in it was this amazing handwritten account of explorers that traveled across the desert during a flood. And what happened was that the flood dried up behind them. They thought they were traveling out in a lake. And they took a whaling boat with them and they became stranded at Tibooburra. And so the account is of the only survivor, which is a 12-year-old ship's boy. And he goes with the indigenous people who attempted to save them, but the others died, and he went with them, and he turns up in Melbourne 5 years later, and goes on to write this account of the futility of traveling across the landscape and the blindness of the European explorers. So that's been sitting in my mind for quite some time, and I didn't quite know how to make something of that. And then I've known in more recent times for about 3 years that I wanted to make an epic work made of ice in the desert, and it became the collision of the idea of using the boat as the metaphor made of ice in the desert. It would be an odd analogy to make, but when I look out the window here and what I've lived in for the past 6 years are these epic glittering structures. And I see the way that light transits across them during the day, and I see the light passing through the canyons. And then I was thinking about the way light tracks across the desert in Australia. And then I was thinking about making something which was really temporal, and the way that there's a kind of temporal but permanent structure to New York. And then I was thinking about the impermanence of time. And so I wanted to make something which was epic, but would only be there for a moment in time, which it would in fact be about the collapse of time and space. And so it would not only be a boat, but it would be on a cant as if it had been hit by some larger force. And then it would disintegrate back into the land. So rather than leaving a devastating mark on the land, which the Western culture has done, could it be a more positive thing? And so in working with the national parks and wildlife, if I do it at a particular time of the year, across August, September, it will melt back into the land, and in its footprint will come the wildflowers. And so what I hope that it will become is an act of healing as well, which I know is a very utopic idea, but that's the basis of it.